It's Why Live. Welcome to another Thursday. If you're wondering, I did get a new journal because last time I was at the end, so now we get to start at a new beginning. Today we're going to be talking about Sabbath and worship. So the verses that we're going to be taking a glance at today are Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11, and Mark 2, verses 27 and 28. Before I read, though, I want you to just take a moment, wherever you're at in this day, and what is your gut reaction? The first things that come to mind when I say Sabbath? And what are the first things that come to mind when I say worship? And keep that in mind. Whatever it is, whatever is that first thought, I want you to hold on to that as I read through these different verses. So we'll start with Exodus. And it says, "Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it." And Mark 2. "Then Jesus said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.'" As I was reading, did your gut reaction change? Did these verses cement the things that you were initially thinking about when considering what worship or what Sabbath is? Do you find yourself wishing that you had more time to engage in these practices? Do you feel like you have a good balance? And how are these ideas connected in your life or just in the ether? How do you think that they come together? This whole talk actually comes from a discussion I was able to have with a group of high schoolers. I was so impressed with what they had to say on this topic that I thought I would bring it here. Some of the things that they said in regards to worship was very much connected to a Sunday morning service. The things like the songs that we sing. Someone mentioned communion, which I loved to hear. Someone else said hearing the word of God. Another said the benediction, that last thing that the pastor gives, the last blessing before we all get to go and on to the rest of our day. And someone else said simply being with others is how they felt that they worshiped. The answers to Sabbath were very similar. It's a holy idea that we must follow through on, that Sabbath is the Lord's day, or that Sabbath is simply the day that you go to church. Clearly, these ideas of Sabbath and worship can be centered around our ideas of what a Sunday church service looks like. It's one of my personal goals in ministry to encourage people to engage in worship and Sabbath, to engage with God in more ways than just on a Sunday. And worship and Sabbath are kind of the cornerstones for me on how we get to do this. I had a classmate once. The assignment was to engage in Sabbath, to put aside at least 8 hours in our week to focus on God and to rest, to carve out time away from work. And this classmate decided that he was going to do all 8 hours on the same day in one solid chunk. He decided he was going to go to a museum, and then he was going to go downtown and just kind of walk around and be in the city, see the sights, and be a little bit of a tourist in his own town. This classmate was also absolutely miserable the entire day. He was miserable because, as a self-proclaimed extrovert, all that he wanted to do was to be with his wife, to be with some of his friends, to be with his children, to still do all of those things, but just to not do them alone. I don't typically comment on what other people do or how they decide to engage in assignments like this, But I couldn't help myself in feeling a lament for him. Because what I did for this assignment was I went skiing with friends. I went and enjoyed the company of God's creation, getting out of my typical routines and in being with friends, where at the middle point in the day, we got to share a meal together. It was horribly expensive because lodge food always is, but it was so, so worth it. Jesus himself reminds us that the Sabbath was made for humankind and not the other way around. So after these stories and these verses and all of this, again, I ask, what is Sabbath? What is worship for you? Worship for me is the experience of moments of pure joy and pure contentment as I get to do the things in this life that fill me up, that give me joy. And Sabbath is a deep breath. It's a break away from work and engaging in worship. Again, my peak place of Sabbath, I think, is skiing. Being out in creation, God's playground. Being with friends in an activity that gets my heart rate up and where my emotions and my thoughts are purely my own. So where is this for you? If it's skiing, let me know. And as soon as the first snow falls, we can go together. But maybe it's being at the beach. Maybe it's knitting in your favorite chair. Maybe it's hosting a dinner with friends. Whatever it may be, I hope you're able to identify it. Maybe it's being at church. And that's so, so awesome. So, so wonderful. But again, I would love to look at the smaller ways that we can engage in this throughout the week. The everyday acts that give you joy. It is my firm conviction that God did not create us to simply sit at a desk and stare at a screen. We were made unique, each person with their own set of loves. I think the greatest acts of worship that we can engage in are when we are enjoying the playground that God created for us, to revel in all the good things that we get to take part in. And finally, it's giving thanks to God for all that we have been given, and that we were made unique, and that we get to enjoy these things that we get to enjoy in. If Sabbath is rest and a deep breath, and worship is gratitude for being who God created us to be, it's much easier to engage with worship and Sabbath throughout our week. So I hope you find it. I hope as we go on from today and from the rest of our week and our months, I hope we can carve out time in our busy, busy schedules to breathe, to take a breath, or to simply acknowledge in gratitude and in thanks for what God has instilled within us and the wonderful and enjoying things that we get to take part in.